Hello students, hello everyone, good morning all of you. And coming to this, the inferior surface of cerebrum. And before going to discuss about the inferior surface of cerebrum, please subscribe to my channel and just ring the bell so that you will get the notification whenever I upload new videos of the neuroanatomy or any other class. Okay, so just moving to the inferior surface of cerebrum or the base of the brain. What are the main things you can identify? You can see the behind the cerebrum, we can identify the midbrain, then you can see the pons and as well as the medulla oblongata. Then coming to the base of the brain, what are the structures we can identify? First we can identify the orbital and the tentorial surfaces of the frontal and the temporal lobes of both cerebral hemispheres. Then you can identify interpeduncular fossa, then ventral aspects of midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, and cerebellum we can identify. And last, we are going to see the superficial attachment of the cranial nerves. So here we are just looking the brain from inferior view. So here you can identify the stem of the lateral sulcus, or what is the other name for this is the Sylvian fissure. Okay, so at the inferior surface of the cerebrum, we can identify the stem of the Sylvian fissure or the stem of the lateral sulcus. So this stem of the lateral sulcus is dividing the base of the brain or the inferior surface of the cerebrum into two surfaces. Anteriorly it is called as orbital surface, and posteriorly the entire this surface is called as tentorial surface. Tentorial surface. Then we can identify anterior perforated substance which is just present above the stem of the lateral sulcus. We can identify a diamond shaped part over here lateral to this optic chiasma. This substance is called as anterior perforated substance. Okay, so this anterior perforated substance is bounded in front by olfactory trigone. Olfactory trigone. So here we are seeing the olfactory tract, and then this olfactory tract is going to divide into medial and lateral striae. So behind the medial and the lateral striae, just above the stem of the lateral sulcus and lateral to the optic chiasma, this diamond shaped structure called as anterior perforated substance. Okay, then what we can identify is medial to this anterior perforated substance, we can identify optic chiasma. Then behind we can identify this part is called as uncus. Okay, this stem, or it is a stem of the lateral fissure, and behind this part is called as uncus. Okay, so this is the uncus of temporal lobe. Uncus of temporal lobe, and this area is pierced by central branches of middle cerebral arteries. Central branches of middle cerebral arteries, they are piercing the anterior perforated substance and supplies to it. Then orbital surface is slightly concave. This is orbital surface is slightly concave and formed by the lower surface of the frontal lobe. Then we can identify a sulcus over here. This is a medially we can identify olfactory sulcus, which lodges the olfactory bulb, and olfactory tract. The tract reaches the anterior perforated substance and it is going to divide into medial and lateral striae. The elongated area medial to the olfactory sulcus is called as the gyrus rectus. This part is called as the gyrus rectus. This sulcus is called as olfactory sulcus. Medial to the olfactory sulcus, this gyrus is called as gyrus rectus. Then rest of the orbital surface, we can identify a H-shaped sulcus over here, H-shaped sulcus, and this H-shaped sulcus, it doesn't have any particular name, but remember it is a H-shaped sulcus. Is dividing this the lateral part of the orbital surface of the base of the brain into four areas: anterior, posterior, medial, and lateral. Okay, these are the four areas. They are divided by H-shaped sulcus. Where it is present? It is present at the orbital surface lateral part of the orbital surface of the frontal lobe of the brain, we can identify this H-shaped sulcus. Medially, we can identify gyrus rectus, and here the sulcus is olfactory sulcus. Okay, is it clear? Yes. Then coming to the extensive tentorial surface, and then this entire the surface is called as tentorial surface. So this surface is convexo concavo. It is convexo and concavo surface, means anteriorly it is convex and posteriorly it is concave. So it is formed by the inferior surface of temporal and the occipital lobes of the brain. Okay, occipital lobes of the cerebrum. Then its anterior part rests in the middle cranial fossa, whereas the posterior part it rests in posterior cranial fossa. Okay, posterior cranial fossa, exactly, it is resting on the tentorium cerebelli, which intervenes between the cerebrum and the cerebellum. The tentorial surface presents two antero-posterior sulci. So this tentorial surface of the cerebrum, we can identify two sulci called as antero-posterior sulci, means they are extending from anterior to posterior. Anterior to posterior. They are occipitotemporal and collateral sulcus. Okay, occipitotemporal, and so this is the occipitotemporal. Yes, here you can identify occipitotemporal, and here we can identify the collateral sulcus. Collateral sulcus. And these two sulci, they are dividing this tentorial surface of the cerebrum into three gyri, right? You can identify here one area, here another area. So one, two, and three areas. So the areas are lateral and medial occipitotemporal. Lateral and medial occipitotemporal means lateral occipitotemporal gyrus, medial occipitotemporal gyrus, and here you can identify parahippocampal gyrus. Parahippocampal gyrus. Is it clear? So we have seen two sulci. This sulci is lateral occipital sulci and medial occipital sulcus. Okay, medial occipitotemporal sulcus. Okay, sorry. So one is occipitotemporal here, and medial you can identify the collateral sulcus. Occipitotemporal and collateral sulcus. These two sulci, they are dividing the tentorial surface of the cerebrum into three areas: lateral occipitotemporal gyrus, medial occipitotemporal gyrus, and parahippocampal gyrus. So coming to this collateral sulcus, this is called as collateral sulcus. It is a complete sulcus. You can identify from here to here, means anterior to posterior it is extending, right? So it is a complete sulcus. Why it is called as complete sulcus is it projects into inferior horn of lateral ventricles. So what is the lateral ventricle? Lateral ventricle, it is having three horns: anterior horn, posterior horn, and the inferior horn. So this collateral sulcus of cerebrum, which is extending, projects into the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. Okay, so as that name, which is extending into the lateral uh, inferior horn of the lateral ventricle, that part is called as collateral eminence. Collateral eminence, understand? Then anteriorly this collateral sulcus is continuous with the renal sulcus. Okay, so anterior is continuous with the renal sulcus. Let me show you all this sulci once again. So here you can see that collateral sulcus anterior is continuous as the renal sulcus. Then the uncus forms a part of the pyriform lobe and acts as primary receptive area, for olfaction. And it is continuous behind with the parahippocampal gyrus. The sulcus is collateral sulcus, and this is the parahippocampal gyrus, right? So this uncus is extending. Uncus is continuous behind with the parahippocampal gyrus. The parahippocampal gyrus laterally limited by collateral sulcus, and medially and above it is overlapped by dentate gyrus. Laterally by collateral sulcus, medially which is overlapped by the dentate gyrus. Let me show you another diagram of the dentate gyrus. So once again, it's orbital surface, tentorial surface. Okay, then here you can see the structures I will show you later. Okay, so here you can see that. Yeah, try to bear with me. So here you can identify this is the dentate gyrus. So medially this parahippocampal gyrus is medially limited by this dentate gyrus. Dentate gyrus. Okay, so these structures you remember. Then posteriorly, yes, here you can see the posteriorly. Uh, Let me show you this posterior. The dentate gyrus is continuous with the gyrus fascicularis. Fasciolaris. Gyrus fasciolaris. Pressed in front, it enters the substance of the uncus and bends abruptly medialward as a smooth ridge known as band of Giacomin. So this is the nothing but the dentate gyrus, and here you can identify the free end. This free end is called as band of Giacomin. Giacomin. Okay, so the portion of the uncus behind the band is called as intralimbic gyrus. Intralimbic gyrus. Okay, just remember the dentate gyrus. Okay, and then yes, then you can identify intralimbic gyrus. Intralimbic gyrus. So structures to remember here are one is uncus you remember, parahippocampal gyrus, and then medially dentate gyrus. So this dentate gyrus, what are the structures you can identify in the dentate gyrus are one is uh, dentate gyrus posteriorly, which we can identify gyrus fasciolaris, and this band is called as band of Giacomin. Band of Giacomin. These structures remember. Okay, so that is the structures you can identify in the base of the brain and the tentorial surface. Okay, so moving forwards, and what we can identify is, just bear with me, yes. So a pair of olfactory bulbs which we can identify in the orbital surface, and it is going to divide into olfactory trigone is formed by medial and lateral olfactory striae. Okay, so this medial and lateral olfactory striae and the optic chiasma, and then the stem of the lateral sulcus, and posteriorly the uncus. Between these parts, we can identify anterior perforated substance. Okay, anterior perforated substance, and just posteromedially to this anterior perforated substance, we can identify a diamond shaped part called as interpeduncular fossa. Interpeduncular fossa. So this interpeduncular fossa, try to find out the relations of the interpeduncular fossa. Anteriorly, what we can identify? Optic chiasma. Very good. Anteriorly, we can identify optic chiasma. Anterolaterally, optic tracts we can identify. Optic tracts. These are the optic tracts. Anteriorly, optic chiasma, and here you can identify optic tracts. And posterolaterally we can identify a pair of bases of pedunculi, okay, or cerebral peduncles. Cerebral peduncles you can identify posterolaterally. Then posteriorly we can identify upper border of the pons. Yes, I'll show you another diagram. Yes, here you can identify clearly. So this is the diamond-shaped part called as interpeduncular fossa. Interpeduncular fossa. I'm just explained you about the boundaries of interpeduncular fossa. Earlier, I have explained you about the boundaries of anterior perforated substance. So this is right and left anterior perforated substance, and here you can identify behind posteromedial to this anterior perforated substance you can identify interpeduncular fossa. So the boundaries are anteriorly optic chiasma, anterolaterally optic tracts, posterolaterally we can identify cerebral peduncles, and most posteriorly we can identify superior border of the pons. This is nothing but the pons. So this is superior border of the pons. Okay, that these are the boundaries of the interpeduncular fossa. Okay, interpeduncular fossa. The floor of the fossa presents the structures. What are the structures present at the floor? Let us see that. First, we can identify tuber cinerum. Tuber cinerum. Then you can identify infundibulum of pituitary gland, which suspends the hypophysis cerebri. Then you can identify a pair of mammillary bodies, mammillary bodies, and then you can identify posterior perforated substance. This perforations, this substance is called as posterior perforated substance, which is pierced by central branches of the posterior cerebral arteries. Okay, here the central branches of anterior cerebral arteries. Here the posterior perforated substance, which is present in the interpeduncular fossa, is pierced by the central branches of posterior cerebral arteries. Then it is surrounded by arterial anastomosis called as polygon of Willis or circle of Willis. Okay, so I don't want to, I will explain you the blood vessels of the cerebrum again in the next class. Okay, these are the structures which we can identify in the base of the brain and the interpeduncular fossa. Most posteriorly, what we can identify are, we can identify, first one is oculomotor nerve, oculomotor nerve which we can identify, and then trochlear nerves which present between posterior cerebral and the superior cerebellar arteries. These are the blood vessels which present at the superior border of the pons, and these are the cranial nerves which we can identify over here. These are nothing but oculomotor and the trochlear nerve. Okay, so these are the ventral surface, ventral aspect of the midbrain, and this is the ventral aspect of the pons. So we are going to discuss about the ventral aspect of the midbrain, ventral aspect of the pons in a separate class. Okay, so step by step we will study these structures to remember for a long time. And this is the ventral aspect of medulla. Briefly, I'm just explaining in this video about these ventral aspects of midbrain, pons, and the medulla oblongata. And this is the ventral aspect of cerebellum. Okay, so yep, here you can see that posterior aspect of the pons, and this is the anterior part, anterior boundary of the interpeduncular fossa. So these are the mammillary bodies, and here you can see the posterior perforated substance, and these are the central branches of posterior cerebral artery. Okay, so this is nothing but the circle of Willis or polygon of Willis. Yep, here you can see clearly about the structures, means blood vessels which are present in this particular area. Okay, so in the next class we are going to discuss about the ventral aspect of the pons, ventral aspect of medulla oblongata, and the midbrain also will discuss, and then we are going deep into it, and then we are going to discuss about the basal ganglia. Okay, thank you students.